Sup nerds, Own Goal here. Today we're going to be telling you about an SFT we won with Tomb Kings. This happened last Saturday, and I'd just been doing a bunch of casual viewer streams and losing a whole bunch on stip builds, particularly Daemons of Chaos with Fire. So I kind of had my fill of losing and wanted to try to win for a little bit. So I registered Tomb Kings for the SFT that weekend, and we picked Tomb Kings because they don't have a ton of like unplayable matchups. So while they're not the absolute best faction in the game, they're a pretty good SFT faction because you can scrap out wins. Let's get to the games. In our first match, we faced Maximilianaire on the Vampire Pirates. He's a really skilled undead player and always a tough matchup. I like this matchup for the Tomb Kings. So we built like a pretty wide build with a bunch of archers and a big melee line, and the plan was to collapse his box. It didn't work out quite how we wanted. We set up our deploy pretty wide so that we could contest the center and top points. And because this map has elevation going from like the top right down to the bottom left, we also were favoring the top points with the intention of getting like a downhill fight. So, if we push out there, we get the fight on those points. He's needing to attack us uphill, unless he also matches us there. So the dynamic is people tend to go to the top point and the middle point on this map. We set up and then we pushed out. We tried to get a little bit of poke off while we set up a surround to dive his box, after seeing that he had some mortars and was applying pressure to us. This means we don't have that much time. The mortars will take out our archers, so we do need to get in there. So we poke, 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 and we set up, and then we're prepared for the actual dive. The approach didn't go that well. Max got a whole bunch of damage off, and also, while we were able to get our infantry on the front line, we didn't immediately compromise the back line, and so his mortars and backline shooting were able to stay up for a good amount of time. Then he got us good. He got a huge wind off on our Tomb Guard, blowing away a large portion of our attacking force. And to make matters worse, he effectively stopped our chariot, so it wasn't able to dive his backline and do the kind of damage that we needed to take out the VC shooting or the VP shooting pieces. So therefore, we got down about 2.5K, which you can see here on the value, which is a big hole to be in. So from this point onward in the game, we're pretty hosed. We try to play a tempo game and take the points from him, but it just doesn't work. He plays too fast and too well, and ultimately he takes us out in round one. I'll fast forward here so y'all can see what happens. This puts us in a bit of a tournament hole. Tie breaks are such that your opponent's total wins are who decides who gets into the top four. We play a Swiss and then that happens. So losing round one means that you basically can't lose again if you want a top four. So from here on out, we need to clutch up and not lose any games. In the next round, we take a very simple and very wide Tomb Kings build consisting of essentially all shielded infantry into the Wood Elves of count games. I found this to work pretty well. You support a massive infantry line with a little bit of cavalry and a little bit of arty, and then you push and take the 3 points and hang on to them before they can take them back. I think the Wood Elves are a little bit vulnerable to this kind of strategy. Our push goes to plan as we wrap up the points. We have one cool piece of tech here. We have Lore of Light with the new Lore passive. It gives your entire army magic damage, which is very good against the Wood Elves, where their infantry and cavalry relies on Fizz Resist for its tankiness. The Wood Elf player is unable to keep up with the raw stats and tankiness of the Wall of Undead, and we overwhelm the points, capturing all 3 of them and decisively holding them while also defeating his army. That's enough to take the game home, and we go back to 1-1, riding the bubble on our way back to undefeated and hopefully a tournament win. In round 3, we find ourselves facing the Chaos Dwarfs of Nepez. This can be a tough matchup. They can present armor as well as artillery, which are 2 things that the Tomb Kings can sometimes struggle against. So we take a very shooting-heavy build with the intention of out-shooting him and forcing him to come into our side of the map, where we can countercharge and pick off his slower infantry with our elite monsters and our cheap cav. Hopefully it works. We deploy on the open side of the map so that our shooting can fully leverage unobstructed sightlines. Initially, we decided to go left, and then we changed our mind to go right when we had an eyeball of the terrain and realized it wasn't going to quite cut it for us. Then we deploy in, trying to get a quick reaction on what he's taken, and take over the game with our superior shooting. Initially, we try to lock in on his arty with our Bone Giant, but we realize he's deployed behind the trees. Smart move. And that means that his mortar fire that goes up can go at our troops from behind the trees, but our direct fire bone giant arrows aren't going to be able to hit him. So we decided to try to be the better shooting faction, just ignore the shots from his artillery and focus on the highest value other targets we can get. And here we're taking a gambit that we can shoot for more damage than he can, and trying to be the better shooting faction and just tanking the arty shots because there's not a lot else we can do. Let's see how that goes. He walks up with his infantry and his skirmish cav, and we start taking some shots with both our Screaming Skull and our Boshopti and our Bone Giant on the best targets we can get, doing a considerable amount of damage. This trading goes on for a while, slowly accumulating in our favor. And then we see something important. He sent in a Chaos Dwarf train, and the train is walking right into the fire cone of our elite anti-large shooting between the Bone Giant and the ROR Boshopti. So this should be like a wooga, 5 alarm fire, all hands on deck, target acquired. And for us, we do spot it, and we react with our missile fire and our complement of anti-train elements. And you can see there's a pretty good effect to this. With the train evaporating, we take a compelling value lead of about 1.5k gold, which should be enough to win the game. So from here on out, we just need to summon cavalry, chariots, infantry, and take good trades and grind out as many of the points as we can. And a lot of the time when you get up a little bit like this, you want to just muscle your position. So like you don't need to be too clever. Try to just summon things that trade 1 for 1 or maybe even a little bit down. So that's like melee infantry and melee cav. And get on the points, take all the points and take those trades. And you can grind out the advantage that you've won with your initial salvo. And this applies to shooting tactics, but also any other tactic like cavalry trades or getting good infantry matchups or flanks or what have you. But basically, when you get ahead, you can muscle onto the points, trade stuff off, and grind them out on both value and points at the same time, which is a good way to close out games. I see a lot of folks, take too many ranged units or try to be too clever on additionally value trading. And there is a point in time where enough is enough, and you need to just like bury them in melee advantage and control the points to win. We execute on this plan cleanly enough, resulting in capturing the points, trading things off, and muscling our opponent out to go 2-1. Now we're looking at a potential win in the next round. We need to clinch it and go to the top 4 so that we can stay alive to win this tournament. For a win-in match, we find ourselves fighting the forces of Nurgle, championed by our teammate Bostos. Bostos is an adept melee player. We're fighting him on Itza, and Tomb Kings is a faction that has a lot of good tools into Nurgle. They kind of have to split the difference on worrying about you taking large cat constructs or more of a kite build. We go for kite, backing up some sepulchral stalkers and skirmish cavalry with a solid front line and powerful reinforcements like the catapult and melee shopti. And this is by polarizing them, taking either like a kite and kind of wide build or an SE build. We force them to split the difference or risk losing to one or the other when we bring too many tools for them to actually handle. Bostos opts for a very safe deployment and slow movement out, protected by the ridge between the center point and the high ground point. So we move out to capture all of the points and apply aggressive poke to minimize the amount of time that he has to build up a large melee army. This comes up a lot when you're playing kite. You want to go pressure the opponent because if they have too much time, they can build up a very, very large melee force and push out and take the points and defeat your slow-moving army elements before you're able to actually DPS them out with your kite elements. So the more aggressively you can get into contact and start emptying ammo into their vulnerable units, the better you can do, and the worse they'll do. On top of that, he's got a Soul Grinder of Nurgle, the ROR, the Noxbringer, a very cool unit. I love this unit. And his intention is to use this while he builds up a bit of a melee force to counterpoke us. So we're going to need to be careful about that, not take too much counterfire while we maximize the amount of damage we can inflict on him with things like our Skirm Cabs, our Sepulchral Stalkers, our reinforcement shooting, and the spells of our Lord and Caster. We see game-winning opportunity when we're able to bog down the offensive melee forces of Nurgle and get our Boshopti into like a safe quarterback-style pocket. The ROR Boshopti can absolutely destroy large SEs like the Noxbringer, and so because he's unable to get on the back line and we're able to get a clear shooting line onto his RAR, we can do really, really significant damage here. And while that's all going on, we can also take favorable trades with our reinforcement summons like our light cavalry into his overextended front line. Let's see how that goes. Bostos scraps pretty hard, but he gets into this weak position, and we're able to take good trades with a bunch of our ranged things. the ROR Tomb Guard, which just absolutely whacks anything on their front line, and generally like efficient Tomb Kings units. This results in us going up, let's say, like 1400, 1500, which is exactly where Tomb Kings wants to be. So once we achieve that value lead, we know it's time to sound the horn of war, send in the melee units, and convert our value lead into a win by just flooding the points and trading things off like we did in the previous game. This works out for us, and we're able to win our winning in, putting us up to a 3-1 record in Swiss and preparing us for what will ultimately be a challenging top four with some really top tier players. Let's move on to that and see how it goes. Our first semifinals opponent is Berserk, a previous world champion and one of the absolute top players in the game. He's playing the Wood Elves, and we bring a similar build to what we did last time, where we have a big wall of shields and infantry, the Lore of Light to turn off their fizz resist and counterpoke some of their ranged, and a bunch of reinforcement melee cav to overload them after we do our initial push and capture the points. It's hard to tell what Berserk's going to do. He has a big range. So this is definitely spooky going into our semifinal, and we expect to have quite a bit of a challenge. For our deployment, we go ultra wide. This is a map that can really reward that. There's a lot of space to move up. So we deploy in a really flat line with the intention of evening out into a concave once we identify where the Wood Elves have gone. Because he can go SE play or a melee build or like a 20 stack or kite, there's a lot of things that he could be doing. And so, we need to be reactive and like try to identify what he's on as soon as the game starts and then adapt our game plan accordingly. Berserk's deployment is kind of bewildering. We can't really see anything. And initially, we thought he might be on like a Waywatcher kite, but he has 16 units, so there's no way that he was taking 3 Waywatchers, which are ultra expensive. So we have no idea what he's doing. Maybe like a hidden cav rush or something. And we make a judgment call that with this many infantry, we'll be able to push up and brace and counter some in mass if he's on like an all cav dive. So we imagine he's doing some kind of monkey business. We don't know what, and we decide to push up and put him to the test. Once we see the skirmish cav coming out, we're extremely confused because what could he possibly be taking 16 units on and not exposing an army? Like, where is Berserk? It doesn't make any sense. Where is he? We summon in our Lightcaster because we think he's probably going to be on a balanced build of some variety. And that means that it's going to you do its job. We've got a double caster Usarians on backup, but that's only if he's on like a very, very cav and retreaty build. And then we see it. This is ridiculous. Berserk has put his entire army in the bushes and is prepared to walk them up, walk them out onto the point, and fight us. I've never seen anything like this. There's some matchups where you see this kind of play, but typically it's not when a shooting faction is facing down a melee faction, and certainly not like the massive clown car of archers. So we see an opportunity to stuff him with some melee cav while we hold all the points. And now we know the game is going to be almost entirely about shifting as many of our forces over to keep that blob from coming online as possible. We're able to apply pressure, keep him in the blob, and get a really, really good trade and total map control with our infantry. Fast forwarding through this, this is pretty much how the game goes. Like, he took the big clown car strategy. He got his hand caught in the cookie jar, to be honest. And ultimately, that resulted in a really good outcome for the Tomb Kings, where we had both a tempo and points lead, as well as a significant value lead, as well as a reinforcement lead. So this is more than enough to take it home for us, and that'll push us on to the finals. In the finals, we're facing down Bretonia, recently buffed, piloted by the powerful Blood Penguin. Blood Penguin's like an absolute fixture of Warhammer 3 and earlier Warhammer titles, and is the kind of hyper-experienced, championship-experienced player that you expect to face to bring down a tournament. We opt for an extremely sepulchral stalker heavy build, hoping to catch out his heavy cavalry. These armored shooting short range units are really good against specifically enemy cav, and we know that on the last patch, Bretonia had a huge buff to questing knights, which we expect to result in bringing a whole lot of this unit as players like Blood Penguin are experimenting with them. So we're preemptively getting in front of that. We deploy out in a relatively spread formation, ready to contest the center of the map. And we deploy our stalker so that they can mutually reinforce each other with our fire, so that if one unit dives any of them, the other stalkers can shoot on it. And then the center of our build is the ROR Boshapti, which we're going to use to put time pressure on him while we attempt to capture the points with skirms while keeping our main defensive formation in a safe position. we see Blood Penguins spawning in with a pretty standard mix of infantry, a lord and some heroes, and cavalry. We're able to get some shots and poke on him with our skirmishers and our Boshopti, which results in him going for like a relatively early dive. He also hasn't seen our stalkers, so he's not positioning his dive well to account for the 3 stealthed elite anti-cavalry units. This results in a tournament winning opportunity where we're able to put massive damage down onto his diving cavalry with our Rar Boshopti, and then when they get in range, also the stalkers on his cavalry. You can see here, like, we're slowing it down. The knights get just absolutely shredded, and they've gotten ahead of their infantry support, so effectively our entire army is fighting a small portion of his. Like a tin can opener, we pull open the knights, do massive damage to them, and get a lead that we'll be able to convert into a win fairly easily from this point onward. We're feeling really good right now because we feel like we've won the tournament, and there's not a whole lot that Blood Penguin can do about it. You know, he still does have like his infantry, and he's getting a 3 cap, but a point lead this big, this early in the game is going to be exceptionally difficult for him to come back from. So let's see how like the rest of the game plays out on fast forward. Without his heavy cav to support him, the swarm of Tomb King's light cavalry and infantry is able to pretty easily overpower the Bretonian lines. He gets like a decent point lead here, you know, taken up to 400 and further. But while that's going on, we're accumulating our gold lead up to about 2k, which is just going to be totally insurmountable. And from that point onward, it's kind of the same playbook we've been talking about before, where we summon out a whole bunch of light cavalry and melee units to compound our gold lead and provide capture weight onto the points. One key thing to mention if you are going to try out Tomb Kings is that their infantry got nerfed recently. So it only provides 1.5 capture weight. And so you really need the light cavalry and medium-sized cavalry and constructs and all those other things to help take the points. Skelly Swarm can still kind of do something, but it's not ultimately the thing that gets it done. We're able to reverse 3 cap around 1,000, and Blood Penguin sees the writing on the wall. Now we go enter our win. That was the finals. We are the tournament victors, and our sweaty Tomb Kings is rewarded with another win to go in the trophy case, and hopefully a qualification for the next World Championship. Thanks everybody for watching. If you like this kind of content, remember to subscribe. See you all later, nerds.